Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Got a really cool video, especially for you hardcore audiophiles today. It's an hour-long Zoom, so it's not going to be for everybody, but I do break it up into chapters to kind of give you a taste of what's in this entire Zoom. I think it's well worth watching the whole thing. We went in with no script and I had no editing needed. It's really pretty impressive, at least by what my standards are and what I wanted to communicate in a Zoom. And basically what I'm doing with these Zooms, I've done them in the past, is share with you when I group all these people together. These are all members of my WhatsApp group and the members of the YouTube channel. So again, if you want to join, you subscribe, and then a join button comes up on YouTube. You can join, get access to about 60 other videos I haven't released to the public. Plus, you get access to this WhatsApp group where you can interact with these same people you see and a bunch more. I mean, I've got people from Iceland, Australia, Africa, all around the globe we have in that WhatsApp group. And so if you like daily interaction with people, and I think what you're going to get a impression, if you haven't already, when you listen to these people talk in the Zoom, everybody has so much experience, so high level systems and stuff. You don't need to have that to participate. You could just lurk and ask questions and absorb. But there is so much knowledge and everybody's got each other's back in this. There's no agendas or anything. But I think that'll come through in this video in what we talk about, and it covers everything from the recent Spectacular AudioFest, the recent what stood out to Dave and Doug when they came here. We talk about power delivery, even though Rex, the electrician, wasn't on this call. We talk about Steve's experience and Dave's experience with his isolation transformer, all contact enhancement, all kinds of things that, again, I've been trying to expose on the other side of the wall that people have been neglecting. We talk about the $1 million audio system that Steve was involved in, a special project that Steve worked on with Doug to create a bespoke preamp that now is the basis for a new model for him. And really what that's a real important part to watch in this video, because this is a process that not only fun, but gives you better value and better performance, which is extremely rare to have all those things in one in this hobby. So we go into that in a little more detail. If you haven't seen my videos in the past, we talk about, I talked about LACQUERS and what really stood out to me, why LACQUERS impressed me so much, and Steve's experience, why. We talk about content when they came over to my place. Now, they've been in my place many times. And we did briefly talk about, as Steve wanted to hear about my system. And before I get to that, we'll talk about the content. There's a lot of content that I show them when they come here. That's the new stuff I want to show them. So we talk about a few of those pieces near the end of the video that you may, if you don't own, you might want to try. But one other thing that came up when Steve asked them about my system, now they've talked about it in the past, but briefly they said that my system was dialed in. And when I heard that, it kind of resonated with me that that's an adjective that you don't see often when people talk about other systems. And it's really the one adjective that involves the person that owns the system in terms of how they've set it up and the tools that they have, at least like the mini DSP, SHD, room treatments and whatnot. And so when I heard that, even though we were just briefly talking about it, it made me think that I need to do that more in this upcoming Capital Audio Fest, which starts this weekend. So I'll be there and I'll be doing my normal coverage. Stay tuned for that. But I am going to be a little more critical of this show for that aspect of it. Usually you kind of excuse rooms, you excuse setup, show conditions, and there has to be some level of tempering of what they can and can't do. But I am going to be particularly paying attention to who can extract the best out of their gear and dial it in the best, because that's a great litmus test of their skills and not just creating a fancy brand, fancy chassis, or even good performing gear on a test bench, but how can it translate to your room in a much more difficult environment, not a dedicated room maybe? How can they navigate challenges best? And that is worthwhile giving credence to that I really haven't in the past. So just wanted to give you a little preview of what's coming. I got chapters if you can't watch all at one time, but I think you're going to enjoy. So without further ado, let's get started.
So both Doug and Dave, you were in Houston visiting, right? So you got to go up to Jason's place and visit him.
Oh, I'll tell you that, Houston, what a hellscape. I mean, you're surrounded by these beautiful homes, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful people. I mean, nice roads. Horrific place to be. We went there early, actually. I got there on Thursday. But it was so bad that I think maybe next year I'm going to have to leave earlier than that, I think, just to catch in all the.
Yeah.
But you also
Oh,
spent
yeah.
all day Thursday at Buc-ee's,
More
right?
time to settle in.
Yeah. Because we got there Thursday around noontime. Well, actually, no, it was around 5. Yeah, on
Did
Thursday.
Pepe drag you through Buc-ee's?
Well, tried to. He missed the exit, if you could believe that.
That was the first time I've ever been to Buc-ee's, is when Pepe made a rash exit.
Yeah.
Let me
It's always on the way
experience
home.
that
That's
story.
yeah.
But anyway, you guys got to get the full experience in
Yes, we did.
Jason's
I would say so.
den of audio. Can you get more than one person seated in there at a time, Jason? Or
At my place, there's
Yeah.
seats for 3.
three?
But,
Okay.
but really, there's only one.
Only
true
one person's
spot.
happy, though.
Yeah.
Nah,
Ultimately, yeah.
I know how that goes.
Same as my room. Same as most, I think.
Well, Jason, it's good you're going to have a break of your liver going to Capital Fest.
I don't know how much of a
Actually,
break that is.
A vacation of your body doing that.
I'm going to try it. It's in Rockville, Maryland. I think I'm going to drink even more because there's probably nothing else to do, but we'll see. I wish you guys could make it up there. It's always good. I mean, these shows are more and more fun.
Yeah.
For some reason, they treat me better now that I have a YouTube
Yeah.
channel. I don't know.
Well, I got an email for Expona for coming up in April for early tickets and stuff. So
Okay, cool.
I
Yeah,
think
we'll
I'm definitely
do that.
going to make some reservations early.
That's definitely one you got to go to, Doug, and certainly Steve, if you can go back that one.
And I haven't been doing the show circuit since I don't have a company to represent at the shows anymore. Even if I did, I've done it so much in the past. It's like been there, done that. I mean, I've always enjoyed being at the shows, but getting to them and then packing up and getting back, so much work involved that I was happy to be at. I was up in Seattle for the show up there,
Right.
That's the first one I'd been to in a while, and that's largely COVID related. So, it was nice to see that. And as you know, I was kind of hanging with Gary Coe and did a little presentation in his room. And then you and I got to, you showed me some of the highlights that you had seen around the show, and the Linkwitz speakers were a standout.
As well as, I'm glad you talked about that, because that's one thing. We're going to get to you and Doug's venture on the preamp, but one thing I did want to circle back on was talking to you after Seattle, the Gary Coe's room. I didn't have too much video content, although in the membership section I put more and more of the direct-to-disc examples, but that was very impressive, kind of riveting presentation, hearing your history and whatnot. But also, I think two of the standouts, like you said, the Linkwitz speaker, I made enough hoopla over that. And I think you shared some enthusiasm with that as well. But also, one thing we looked at was the power distribution box.
Yeah, which caught my attention right away. I think that's a really cool idea and very well done. Now, apparently, we wound up talking to someone who represents that product, but it's Rex, is it?
Yeah, so this was another gentleman that also produces that box, but Rex is also, I guess they were former partners.
Okay.
I don't know the exact relationship at one time or now even exactly, but Rex provides that same box. And spoiler alert, I am going to be putting that into my dedicated room just to see.
I think that's great, and I look forward to hearing your take on that, because we know that good clean power and grounding is really essential for getting the best out of your equipment, and the way this approach that this guy has in conjunction with a good electrician, getting all the basics right, and then putting in, it's like a 50 or 60 amp feeder to your audio system, and then this dedicated panel breaker box. So it's all common power, common ground, best quality. And I mean, it's a relatively low cost I mean, it's a lot less of an investment than many cables or amplifiers or other pieces of equipment. And it's the kind of thing that can make a really fundamental improvement in everything that you're doing with your system and your hearing there. So I know you covered that product, I think, in the video from the show. At least it shows up in that video. And then you've talked about it a bit since then. And I know you've done the various videos with King Rex Electric and Rex looking at your house, looking at 3MA, checking out the power systems there and advising them on how to make improvements. But I think it's cool that you're going to get that distribution box put into your audio room, and I'm anticipating good things for you from that.
The way I look at the whole series in general, not just that distribution box, but it's enlightening me to put some perspective in, and no analogy is perfect, but it's similar to changing the oil in your car, getting everything, at least at choosing the best oil, and all these things that potentially can give you the best performance. Now, going to the store for groceries, you may not notice in your car performance, but when your car needs it, and you're same thing with your system, to have that power delivery unencumbered, no low voltage sags, have the grounding benefits and all these things just makes so much sense. And as you alluded to, the cost profile relative to what people are spending on the last 6 feet of a power cord, I mean, if that is legitimate and makes sense to a lot of people, certainly this end of it, it just doesn't stop at a wall. It should carry all the way through, just common sense. And that's something I kind of, my own, theory and experience in the hobby, never really thought it through, but now I am. So I'm hoping to share that with more people and that they see the light of that advantage as well.
It's always been my struggle spending a lot of money on a power cable is, that just takes you from the wall to your system. Everything before that, if it's flawed, then you're just basically delivering continued flawed.
Well, that's intuitive logic about that. But nevertheless, I mean, for me, I find that those power cords that we're talking about do have a real impact on sonics, regardless of what may have come before. And the whole point is, can you hear it or not? So when I change those out in my system, I hear the differences very clearly, and I think that's an important part of getting the performance that I'm looking for. But it's like everything else in audio. If you hear it, fine. If you don't, then don't waste your money on that. It either makes an important difference to you or it doesn't. Yeah, there you go. Keep
I bought it for my open reel because of contacts, supposed to really take care of any sticking contacts. And then later on, I mean, it came up on the forum, they were discussing it. And I didn't realize it was good for all these other things as well.
Yeah, it's a good general purpose contact cleaner and enhancer. KEG makes a whole bunch of products that are related for electrical performance.
When I had built my room, I was very fortunate, since starting from the beginning, I was able to run good electric. I was able to run 100 amps directly to my room, and from a house had a 6-breaker main, so I was able to run a 100 amp breaker right to my room, and then from there I have an isolation transformer which is fed 220, and I'm breaking it down to the 110.
Yeah, it's
just an industrial. It's like an instrumentation isolation, a SOLA, industrial thing that.
Yeah, I
mean, like you said, they do not cost a lot of money. When you're on the commercial electrical side, wonderful. It's like what, $600 maybe.
How much, Jason? You have a Furman whole house.
It's a Richard
power
Gray
conditioner, right?
Pardon me, Richard Gray.
Pardon me, Richard Gray's, yeah.
Surge kind of lightning strike kind of industrial level at the breaker box. Just to give me.
Okay, so it's not an isolation transformer system. Okay,
no, it's more of a industrial level MOVs that aren't the ones that deteriorate as fast and can handle the major, just for sleep easier at night. Which I was very impressed at and happy to see that Rex took a look at it and was very impressed and has.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we're going to put one at he advised 3MA, that's who I got it from, to do it at their own place, as well as my friend Steve, who's got that MBO Extreme system. It does make sense to do that.
By the way, are we missing Ryan? I see his picture has shown up here.
Yeah, Ryan, you're not muted, but you want to join in anytime you can.
Yeah, sure. I'm here. I just, you guys don't want to see my ugly mug, so
that's true. That's true. Yes, thank you for that. I'm glad you found some royalty-free picture to put up there.
Well, just know that was 20 years ago. I'm not near that pretty anymore.
Well, Ryan is actually in the same boat of my friend Steve in a lot of respects, although Ryan's even going to the nth degree of a dedicated room for his system. And he's been sharing, obviously, in the WhatsApp group some of that. So that is definitely going to be worthy of a video and Zoom call in the future. He lives in Oklahoma, so I got to find a reason to go up there other than to buy THC.
I'm not reason enough. I'm not reason enough.
Debatable. But yeah.
Well, Tulsa, I'm in Tulsa. Tulsa has a really old audiophile community, and they're relatively quiet. But the more I get into the community, I'm fairly new to Tulsa, but the more I get into the community, the more I realize how big it is. And it's the music history and community in Tulsa is deep, and it's old. We got lots of music history, and it's really a great place. I'm a good fit for Tulsa, so it feels good. I almost feel like home already.
Well, we'll definitely get up there at some point. What's the ETA now in your room?
Oh, give me a couple of weeks. My work schedule is pretty tough, and I'm away, and I'll be home next week. And I'm remodeling my home, and my wife, her opinion of my room is it's always last in line. So I've got a few to-do list honeydews to knock out before I get on my room, but I do have quite a few interesting additions and changes to make to my room as I'm putting it together. So
and speaking of power, real quick, Ryan, you were the one that shared, I think I even mentioned it in one of the videos, you had a very severe situation, independent of the person locally that Rex looked at, but you would share where you had a very dangerous situation with your power, right?
Yeah, it was really concerning, and we jumped. It was one of those deals where it was almost hard to sleep that night. We found an issue as we were doing this remodel, and I was looking at the panel with my electrician with regard to my room and what we were going to do to add on to the electrical system for that. And we discovered a very serious issue that could have really resulted in a major house fire. So digging deeper into this and pulling the front of your panel off, the door of your panel off, so you can get back in to see, your wires and your breakers and all and that such. I'll tell you what, that was very enlightening and very eye-opening. Our panel was overloaded by something like they had loaded some of these strain reliefs by like 160% load capacity, and it had caused wire shorts from the main power, or the main meter can. So super concerning and made me very nervous. We got it fixed up the very next day, but yeah. So while I was digging into expanding on my audio system, just the electrical for that room, it exposed a serious issue with my house. So
yeah. So let me make sure somebody was texting. Okay, I want to make sure it wasn't for our WhatsApp. Yeah, just to put a bow on that, it kind of parlays both into what Steve said and you said, and what I've seen with Rex is that really it comes down to connections. And I want to think that maybe that 6 foot of power cord, yeah, the conductor and the geometry of it may be of benefit, but what I've kind of learned now is looking, and we talked about deoxit, the keg stuff, it's the connections that are really probably the biggest improvement. That nexus can sometimes be better or worse and translate into that performance. I know when I charge my phone right here, sometimes when I put the cable in, sometimes it says fast charging, sometimes slow charging, based on the quality of that connection. You wiggle it better. We don't have that kind of feedback on our gear saying that connection's good or not. And in some cases, the power cord is leveraging, it's not a good connection. So all these things, maintenance-wise, the deoxit, getting a better quality power cord that gives you a truly better connection is kind of where I'm at in terms of what I would spend my money on and look for tangible improvements. But just wanted to put that bow on that.
I know that there are a few people in our industry that are professional setup people that travel. They're hired guns to come out and do, major equipment setups around the country and around the world. And I know that some of those people, their starting point is to deeply clean and in many cases polish all of the connections. So, I mean, it doesn't matter how elaborate the system is, they just, take whatever amount of time it takes and have their routine figured out for what they're using to clean, to enhance, in some cases, polish the connections, to, again, get all the connections to be as good as they can possibly be. And they see that also as a fundamentally important starting point. So it's one of those maintenance chores that can be a pain to do, but can really pay off as well.
Steve, a question for you. You might know, what about phasing? As in, if you're coming off a distribution box for your room, should you stay on the same side of the 110 of the 220? You know what I mean?
That's a darn good question. And this is something I don't really ever hear talked about. It's only come up very recently. Actually, I think Rex mentioned it in something he was talking about. Okay, my experience is that it does make a difference, but the problem is you have to listen to both phases to understand what the difference. It's one of these things where you can't measure it. There's no way to tell except to literally swap which phase is feeding your audio equipment room, and to
keep everything on that same one then.
Pardon?
And then keep everything on that same
phase.
phase.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, didn't Vandenholm make a polarity checker? I don't know if it's
Various people have made testers for checking AC polarization of equipment. And that ultimately gets back to how the power plug is plugged into the wall, whether which side hot and neutral are connected to. Now that's something like I pay attention to in all the equipment I do. So that's set up, but when the equipment goes out, so that as long as your house is wired to code, when you plug it in, it'll be right. But not everybody does that. I think it's much more common these days. But it's one of those things, you can get a tester at the hardware store for $3 or $4 to just check to see that the outlets are wired correctly and that, line, neutral, and ground are all there in their correct orientation.
And that's something that gets confusing. Some people believe the polarity is phase, or actually the polarity is polarity. And the phase, of course, I think we're referring to is that the 220 breaks into two halves of 110. Right. And each half of 110 is opposite of the other half of 110.
Correct.
And that's my phasing. I'm like my isolation transformer. I have the option. I've got two taps coming off my 220 input. Yet I'm running my room just off of the one.
Correct. I understand.
Yeah.
And if you have the opportunity to swap that to the other
and I do, yeah.
polarity, I would suggest you do that. And again, all you got to do is put on a piece of music you're familiar with, listen to it the one way, do the swap, listen to it again. And you probably will hear some difference, and you probably will have some preference for one way or the other. Now, I think, there have been some instances where people have felt it made quite a substantial difference. So getting it right was really important. But this may be one of those things that some people are more sensitive to, or some situations are more sensitive to. All I can tell you is that I think it's worth doing if you have the opportunity. And it's no right or wrong. It's just, you listen and you decide which way sounds better.
It's definitely a worthwhile topic.
If you can avoid it.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
You shouldn't mix phases. If you can avoid mixing phase on your connections, you shouldn't do it. As far as having one receptacle on the one side of 110 feeding equipment, and say another receptacle on the other side of 110 feeding equipment as well.
And a lot of people won't have any control over something like that. And
right.
But generally speaking, in a given room where you might have your equipment set up, it's probably all coming off of one phase, and it's all common in that sense. But it's tricky. It would require specialized equipment to test that. An electrician could come out and look at your breaker box and panel and see how things are being fed and tell you. But that's a level that most people aren't going to get into. And because you have that isolation transformer and you do have access to one side or the other, that you're in an unusual situation where you can actually test that notion.
Yeah, so I think that's good coverage. I'm going to obviously have a lot more in the future, especially with my own system on power, because I think this is an area we need to dive in more. But one thing I wanted to focus on today is a Zoom that got corrupted between me, you, Steve, and Doug about his new preamp. But even before we get into the weeds on that, because that's a very cool project, we're going to talk about it a little bit more detail. I figure for those that weren't here for Spooktacular and last week, getting Doug and Dave's impression, not just the fun stuff, but we did have a little bit of audiophile stuff, both at 3MA, my house, and all this stuff. Any of your takeaways and things that came out from just an audiophile perspective?
I'm impressed with the Coras. They had those set up upstairs. It's always hard when you have a party to do any kind of critical listening. I've never really heard Magicos sound bad. I didn't think that they sounded great at 3MA, the way that they were set up just with all the people there. So I didn't give it really good critical listening. But the Acoras, I've never heard those speakers sound bad. I heard them, I don't know how long it was. We were at Rocky Mountain Audio Fest, Jason. That was the first time I had ever seen those speakers. None of those rooms were really set up well. I think it was a massive room that they had dividers.
Yeah, right.
And even just walking into that room, I was like, wow, look at this speaker. And it was just solid, granite or whatever it's made of. And I was very impressed with it then, but didn't really give too much notice to it. Brand new speaker, never really heard of it. And then saw it again in another audio show, really liked it. I've never heard them sound bad. And they had two systems set up at 3MA, and they're smaller speakers. It was probably what I listened to the most, and those were a lot of fun. And I was duly impressed with them. No subwoofer, just full range bookshelf speakers, sort of on a granite pedestal. So this was a solid setup. And I think that the price that they quoted was like around 17 grand or something like that for them. I'm not sure if that included.
I believe that's right. Yeah, that was without the stands, though. I think.
I think the stands may have added a couple of $1,000.
I think there's two options on the stands.
But for that amount of money, and that price point, I mean, I would find it hard pressed to be disappointed.
Well, forget all of that stuff. What I want to know is Jason's system really as good as he claims it is?
It's pretty good.
It's very dialed in.
Yeah. Especially
that's what I would say.
Like some of the surround stuff, he's got it dialed in pretty well. I mean, he only has 23 hours a day to work on his system. So it's hard to really dial it in,
Yeah.
But no, it's very impressive. But getting back to the 3MA, so I was really impressed with the Acoras and specifically the bookshelf system. If I was, just wanting to sort of pick up a brand new speaker. I mean, there was no real weakness to it. It had great dynamics, and we were throwing everything at it, old Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, and then all of the fancy audiophile stuff that we had too. And it pretty much handled it all. So I was pretty impressed with that.
I thought it was a great pairing of equipment too. That little Boulder integrated amplifier, that new one. Mm-hmm. And they had, I think it was the Bar Talk feeding it.
Yes.
A very simple system.
Yeah.
Yeah, very solid. I was there the day before. You had a chance to listen, and Isaac, the representative there, was, dialing them in, and I was so impressed by, little, minute movements of like raising one a little bit higher than the other one, and just very small little changes, and how it just brought everything into focus. And that room was probably one of the worst rooms to be in, because it's about a perfect square, and it shouldn't have worked at all.
Right.
It worked great.
Yeah. That was my takeaway, because I listened to the Rockports for a while. I think, was it the Signas that they had?
Yes.
Yeah. So I listened to those for a while. Those are fun speakers to listen to, but I mean, like critical audiophile, I kind of preferred the Accoras, to be honest.
Yeah.
And, so that was kind of a surprise to me, just kind of walking around like, oh, let me listen to these things.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave. I was having fun, tapping my feet, putting different stuff on. And aside from needing to go get a refill of my drink, that was the only thing that pulled me out of there.
Well, another takeaway of the weekend, like when you guys come in, you've already been to my house several times and even 3MA. So seeing some new gear like the Cora was sticking out, as well as Magico, but it's also about content. And so one of the funny things that the only negative thing I can say about the Accoras is that Isaac didn't know Cardi B up when I requested it. We had to spell it out for him, and he didn't even know it. But I think he's going to use it going forward because it's not a traditional test track. But quite frankly, I think it impressed everybody in there that it could handle, especially those bookshelves on a track.
And he didn't think it would. He didn't think that it would handle.
That's right. He was very nervous about it. He didn't want to do it.
It did fine. It was perfectly fine.
And so at the end of the day, that's a takeaway that I think a lot of audiophiles get afraid of. And it's probably going to be a video in my mistakes audiophiles make. It's just using easy material and audiophile quality recordings to judge it. Because when you really want to play something fun like that and crank it loud because you're feeling it and you want to show off to your friend and it starts crumbling and bottoming out, that's when you really get disappointed. I mean, if you can listen to Fink and Keith Don't Go, you can only listen to that so much and everybody's already heard it a million times. But you could play Cardi B at large volumes and have fun with it. That's really something people overlook. So, but then we also played some other content. I don't know if you guys had heard the Greatest Showman before. Was that your first time, Doug, hearing that?
Yes. Well, I mean, I was familiar with some of the songs just because my daughter would sing it around the house, but I never saw the Blu-ray or the movie at all. But yeah, that was very impressive dynamics and cinematography and everything was great with that.
Yeah, and we also had a mutual friend of Doug and I's, who wasn't an audiophile, came in, but he was a big Pink Floyd fan. So we played Roger Waters' The Wall. And I think everybody's under the same assessment that the beginning of that concert is probably the best start to any concert ever. And certainly when you're doing surround sound and subwoofer and just the impact of it, that's probably another content thing that we can share with people.
That is a definite demonstration piece of video and audio right there for someone's home theater.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anything better than that.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's The Greatest Showman and that, and Andre Bocelli, and a few other things. But yeah, so yeah.
There are Blu-rays that sound good. I mean, I've got like a AC/DC, and I got some other 9 Inch Nails. There are Blu-rays out there that sound great, but I mean, as far as a bam opening of a concert, I've never seen one in person as spectacular as that, and that truly is impressive.
And we did play a few YouTube videos at a lesser quality in terms of sound, but also better performances and stuff like that. But those two hit the mark on everything. So yeah, just want to make sure everybody was aware of that if they've not tried that yet. But now we can pivot to Doug and your latest equipment, although you haven't had a whole lot of time listening in your system. But Steve's preamp is now in your system to complement the amps that we have talked about in the past.
Yeah, and I guess that was one of the last pieces of your system setup puzzle, Doug. Is that right?
Yes, that was right. I mean, I had a loaner set of Macintoshes that I used for a long time, and I have listened to the system just lately. I haven't had a lot of free time. But no, that's, we got the amplifiers done. That was sort of the first key.
Yeah, right.
Very happy with that. And I was happy with the Macintoshes and still are. But then we decided to do the preamp project as well. And we had some, COVID related supply issues, just like anything else. But when we finally got everything, done and everything set up.
Well, now you're supposed to say that my amps blow away everything else that you've heard.
Well, I will say that I like them certainly better than the Macintoshes, but the Macintoshes held their own. The first thing I noticed right out of the gates was just the gain was so much higher with the.
Well, yeah, that's true. It has nothing to do with quality as such. It just, that's a characteristic of my amp designs. They run a little higher voltage gain than is sort of typical.
Yeah, but it actually worked out better because I had a hard time, if I wanted to do surround, I was having a hard time
Oh yeah, we talked about that. That's right.
balancing. Yeah. Yeah. The video that got erased, we did talk about that a little bit, but I was having a hard time. I had the rear channels, had to bring them all the way down and try to basically elevate the gain on the the fronts, and it was a little bit of a trouble to match that up. And so when I got your preamp in, that just helped balance it all, because instantly I had increased gain on the front. So I've been very happy with it. The detail, their black background, and the detail and dynamics of it are a lot of fun, and it's just easy to use, and the remote's great. So I've been real happy with
Just a little quick background is I've for quite a number of years now, I've been building a special preamplifier called the VRE1, which started out as a project. It's 10 years and more, I think, at this point. But I was originally building it on a Corian chassis. Everything about it was custom. I had experimented with different chassis materials and really liked that. But then as time went by, I got my hands on some Panzerholz and started experimenting with that and used it to make the chassis for my AC Nexus, my power distribution and grounding system, and liked a lot of the things about it. I actually experimented with making a preamp chassis completely out of Panzerholz, but it was impractical for various reasons. So then I started thinking about how I could leverage the good aspects of that in a more real world kind of product, in a real world way. Along the way, Doug got interested in getting a preamp from me. We had done the amplifiers, and so we were talking about doing a version of the VRE1 just for him. Well, then that set me off on this whole tangent about designing a new chassis and working all the details of this stuff out. Long story short, Doug wound up getting the very first version of the VRE2, which is a metal chassis, but it's built around an internal platform that is, in this case, it's a sandwich of aluminum and a very thick chunk of Panzerholz and carbon fiber on top of that to form the mechanical base for the whole unit, which delivers great results. I've been really, really pleased with it. And so that's what we put together for him, along with a definitely an improved power supply. There is a version of the preamp that I do for Hi-Fi One out here that has a completely different power supply, much larger, much more expensive, and a lot more silver content, silver wire transformers, capacitors, wire resistors, all of this stuff kind of taken to the nth degree. But fundamentally, your VRE2 has all of the essential stuff. Same circuitry, same control systems, and really the same chassis. So I was very pleased with how it turned out, and I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Well, one thing I will jump in, just because a lot of the videos I've done with you in the past, Steve, have outlined in detail my relationship with you over the years and some of the advantages I've found. But I want to reiterate those here because it was transpired here that this all came out of Doug contracting you basically with a budget and a desire for a preamp, and you were able to create a product, almost a bespoke at the time. It's now, turned into something that is a platform for a new model and different iterations of power supplies and stuff. But there's so much enjoyment and advantages both to this route I've found in the hobby, because you get to work directly with the designer. It echoes something I've said in the past. That's something you really want as part of the hobby and part of the fun part of the hobby. And then it's getting actually a lot of value. You're getting this added fun and level of expertise, but there's tremendous value. I mean, that preamp on the dealer distributor markup would have probably been a $50,000 piece, or
easily that. I used to, long ago, I had McCormick Audio, and we sold products worldwide through normal distribution channels. brick and mortar retailers and distributors and whatnot. Now I have this small business, SMc Audio, where I work direct with my clients, and I much prefer that. I'm a lot happier with that arrangement because I get to work directly with the people that are actually, living with the equipment. But it also means that there's no middleman markup. So when you get a piece of work that I've done, whether it's an upgrade like on your amplifiers or the preamp, from scratch, you're paying a lot less than you would if you had to go to a dealer and buy that thing.
Just the customer service alone. I mean, just any question we had along the way, we'd call you up on a Sunday. You were kind enough to answer the phone, and we'd have these conversations. I mean, you're just not going to get that anywhere else. And I think it's becoming more and more rare, unfortunately, to have good customer service.
Yeah, I haven't outsourced to India yet.
Yeah. And I think the fun part of it, like Jason said, I mean, the older I get, the more that's important to me is the journey and the fun of it. Whereas I think a lot of new audiophiles coming in, they just, read about an article in Stereophile that this amp's good, and they just buy it, plug it in, and that's it. There's no journey to learn about it and experience it and meet the, owner of the company or the designer of the company. And so it is a lot more fun to know how this is done, what's under the hood exactly, the science behind it. And if I ever have any issues with it, I can just certainly call you, and I know you'll do everything.
Yeah, exactly. And then each piece is really customized to the needs of the individual. Sure, there's an overall framework for what can be done, but like in your case, you needed dual balanced outputs, and we could arrange how many inputs were XLR balanced versus RCA, and all of that sort of stuff could be customized for your particular needs. So we had discussions about that along the way, and then finally settled on a particular arrangement. And I think it's working out for you, I believe.
I think people don't put enough stock into customer service. I've talked about that in my mistakes audiophiles make, and the one I'm releasing as soon as we get off the Zoom, I've already filmed it, has to do with price. So both of those are being echoed here. You're getting better price and better customer service. Like, some people may be cautious. Oh, it's a one-man shop. Actually, you have an assistant, a partner that works. But I've always gotten good customer service in terms of being able to reach you. Doug as well. There really is no sacrifice for getting better value as well. And that's very rare in today's world, especially in the audiophile realm. So it's something I like to tout when I can. And again, hopefully, more and more people, as my channel has grown, has learned about you as well, because really that's saves you a lot of trouble in the hobby, as Doug can attest to on the flip side with another brand.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we won't name, or if he wants to name, we can. But that was just the worst I've seen of customer service and just almost blatant fraud. So yeah.
Are you letting Hildar in? Is it Hildar?
Yeah, I think he's just listening in. He has a phenomenal system, as y'all have noticed in the WhatsApp group. But he had mentioned his English isn't as good, so
Is he the one that has the Dutch and Dutch speakers?
I think he had that Dutch and Dutch experience with them, or loaner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then he's got a great.
Another one.
Oh, it's a different. Oh, that's Sigurd.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so you can hear pretty good. It shows that you're muted, but I can hear you. Can everybody hear him?
Yeah, I'm muting so I don't make any noises and interrupt.
Okay.
Oh, there we are. Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, so
we don't see you.
Courtesy is not allowed here. I'm sorry.
So yeah, you're just joining us a little bit in process. We've been talking about Steve McCormick. We talked about last week's show and some stuff. Ryan's got a dedicated room being built. And one other thing I wanted to talk to Steve about was circling back to that Seattle, and also the room that I went to that had the $1 million acapella sphere on.
Oh yeah, right.
To also parlay to what Doug and I have done stuff to certain budget points. This was a system where you basically had carte blanche and pure silver transformers. You went all out. So it just shows whatever level is required. You've gained the trust of people throughout the budget profiles. And Rick Brown, as well, as you mentioned, Hi-Fi One.
Yeah, right.
Great friends. That was a great trip that I had at the. You didn't come out to the actual Los Angeles show this year, but I was able to visit you guys in that home.
Right, and that was nice that it worked out. We were happy to be able to have you come down and go out and visit that person in that home, which is a pretty special arrangement. I mean, those acapella spherons are quite remarkable, and it's very difficult to wrap your head around how big they actually are,
right,
until you see them in this giant room,
right.
Yeah, that I was happy to be able to contribute to that. I did the full silver version preamplifier for him. Of course, I've been deeply involved with Rick Brown of Hi-Fi One and David Burning on their amplifiers, on the Burning amps that are in there. And then you heard the secondary system, the pool house system, with the acapella, the smaller ones, the Trilons.
Yeah.
I know you were not all that impressed at the time. Now, there's been a bunch of fundamental changes out there since you were here, and now both Jim and Rick agree that that system is sounding in some respects better than the main room.
Oh, really?
Anyway, it's improved a lot, and they've had JR out there to do the turntable setups, and he got my phono stage. And you may recall I mentioned having made one completely Panzerholz preamplifier as an experiment, which I was living with for a while, but that wound up to be a perfect match to go in the pool room system. So he's got that preamp running and my phono preamp, the Burning single-ended triode monoblocks, and the Helix 2 or Mark II turntable.
Domain turntable, yeah.
Yeah, the
Well,
Domain.
you just gave me another reason to come back out there then.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, so that's also talking about turntables a little bit and the direct-to-disc recordings. You had a very detailed seminar on it that I presented in Seattle, but when I got a chance at Rick Brown's house to hear a lacquer for the first time, it was quite ear-opening to me. And I couldn't figure out why would the lacquer be so much better, or at least my perception was, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was mental, but I mean, I really wasn't expecting that much from a lacquer versus vinyl. What do you attribute that to?
Well, mainly it's a single step process. You're cutting the information straight onto the lacquer. And then under the right circumstances, you can play that back at least a few times. And without getting off into the weeds with the details, I mean, there are situations as lacquers age a bit where they can be played more. And you're not going through the whole plating process, making the mothers and fathers and stampers and et cetera, et cetera. I told the story while I was there in Gary's room about my experience with doing real-time direct-to-disc records with M&K back in the late 70s at Jonas Miller Sound, and having the lacquers being sent out to, in this case, it was going to Teldec in Germany at the time, to be turned into records. So the lacquers went there. They did all the plating, creation of the fathers, mothers, and stampers. And I just expect, I heard what came off the lathe. You'd hear these lacquers, not the ones that were being used to create the records, but blown lacquers or, various things that we got to listen to there. And the sound was just incredible. And so I naively expected the records to sound just like that. And so I have to admit, it was actually quite a letdown when we got the first test pressings back, spun those things. And those are the records that we now listen to, the direct-to-disc records that are still held up as some of the, technically among the very best records that have been made. But wow, they did not sound as good as the LACQUERS. And that was a kind of a bitter pill to swallow. And I had to learn that that's just part of the deal. Even the best, certainly what Ken Kreisel thought of as the best company in the world for manufacturing records, at the time in any event, the best they could do was to make something that still fell considerably short of the lacquer. Now I understand that, to be the case, and I wouldn't expect now a pressing to be, hit the same level of performance as a lacquer. So it can be real startling to hear lacquers, if everything's done well. Obviously the recording has to be good as well, but in terms of the quality of the playback, that's among the, well, probably still is the very best of any kind of medium I've ever heard.
I tend to agree after hearing it. I know analog tape has been, for a lot of people, ear opening.
And analog tape is wonderful. I love it. There's marvelous things about it. I mean, sure, it's expensive and it's a giant pain, but the
Big
quality
pain
that can come off of analog tape is fabulous. But the lacquers even went beyond that. Now, some people are very strongly of the opinion that right now, if you do like quad DSD recording, that again, that's like as true to the original sources we can do at this point in time. Maybe that's true. Not going to argue the point, but it is a very, very high fidelity way of capturing and archiving whatever was recorded. But it's also seems to be the case that if you have to do post-production on that, again, various changes involved in signal going through from DSD to PCM and back again, and all of this sorts of stuff, you wind up something that can sound very, very good, but it may not be quite as good as the original. Pretty rare instance when somebody can do a completely pure DSD recording and release it in that form with no manipulation at all. I think there's only a few examples of that around. So anyway, these are the the unicorns or something that, it's fun to have had that experience and that exposure, but it's not what we normally get to listen to. But hey, the LPs that we have, if I listen to those real-time direct-to-disc records on a good system, they sound fantastic. And all I can remember is having been disappointed. I can't remember exactly what the lacquers sounded like. Mm-hmm. But they were pretty phenomenal. I'm sorry I don't have any of those lacquers from those days. And, we were also told back then, the lacquer is a soft material, and if you start playing it back, you will be degrading the high frequency performance right away. And the general rule of thumb, sort of the prevailing wisdom of the time, was you could play a lacquer back about like 10 times, and then there was too much loss to go beyond that. And so, lacquers were a very precious thing, and they had to be handled very carefully, kept super clean, and then sent off for, plating and subsequent pressing if you're going to make a record out of them. But I got to take lacquers fresh off the lathe that were incomplete, blown takes, one reason or another, and take them into the back room at Jonas Miller Sound and play them there. That is crazy good.
Well, the other thing is you were there direct to disc listening to live as well, which is a rare treat. I know Dave actually is another person that has helped assist with recording and has some recordings that I've shared in the WhatsApp group. And we've actually played at shows where you have now somebody that was actually there when it was playing live. And just working on these music videos for my friend who's in a band and has these studio takes, it's really enlightening to me, kind of like what we talked about in Power, how little in the hobby is focused on how these things are mastered, how much DSP is involved in either mastering, and how soundstage is so much of an artificial aspect, and certain things that you just assumed just natively being primitive in the hobby with your understanding. If you invest the time understanding the mastering and all this stuff, and to the level you guys got to, it helps you so much, and playback as well, and to evaluate things. And that's where I'm still trying to grow at. I mean, I've heard just about everything now in gear wise, but this is the level of stuff, the power stuff, and then the mastering and stuff like that is kind of stuff I love to be exposed to. And being exposed to LACQUERS for the first time and the behind the scenes mastering is definitely something I'm going to spend more time in the future, and I would encourage others to do the same. But Dave, you want to talk briefly about your experience in the mastering? I know your videos back when we did it had like 96 views. So
right, people were tired of hearing that song. Yeah. Well, a good start of it was back in the days with Brian Chaney and James Bongiorno, where Brian he got into the idea that he wanted to do live versus recorded.
Right, I remember. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and I think the first year doing that, it might have been 2009. I think it was 2009, and I was
that a San Francisco show or?
Well, this was actually Las Vegas. He did.
Okay.
Yeah, this was at the Alexis Park. I think was the first time that he did that, and actually, he had a full. I didn't do it that year. I did all the other years as far as the DSD stuff, but he had a full use of Ray Kimber's Sony Sonoma workstation. And Ray let him have some of his technicians. And so it was his first year that he did that live versus recorded. And then I and another fella had done it the years after that, up to, I think, 2012. And then he had, passed away in 2012. But yeah, that was great stuff because, you hear he would set the band up, usually a small jazz quintet, quartet, between the speakers. The speakers would be, you'd be in a regular listening room, and we'd have a full, usually drum set, stand-up bass, and trumpet. We had flute, sax, things like that, all right there with a group of maybe 30 people in a regular listening session. And what we would do, they would play one song. And then directly after that song, I would be recording it. We would play back the recording right after the audience heard the musicians play.
Right.
And that was
my memory is that you were using a pretty minimalist mic technique setup.
Yes, we had. Oh yeah, in fact, it was a stereo microphone. Very simple
like
stereo mic XY type of recording.
Bloomline XY, AKG or.
I think it was, yeah, at that back then, yeah. And we had some M audio stuff where we actually had independent mics, but still in just in stereo mode, And but the audience though, they loved it, and it was really close in playback.
Yeah, very cool.
It was just fun.
So you still have those recordings?
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, you have to put them on the Dropbox, and we'll have to share them with everybody.
Oh, not necessarily. Might piss some people off, but well, whatever the legal ramifications.
Right, right. Because I do recordings for other local people too, as well, just for fun, and some, they're all usually priority. They want them guarded.
Yeah. Yeah, they can get pretty. Pretty hard nosed about those kinds of things.
Don't record us. We're terrible. Nobody will want it.
So that's the other thing is that, well, Pepe's not on this call, but yeah, Pepe and my friend Steve, who plays in a legit band. And I've been working on these videos with one of the members of his band, who actually has won 3 Grammys as a bassist. So again, seeing him work with me on these videos and hearing him play, as well as diagnose certain issues when we do the video. It's been fun. But when Pepe came and Doug came, well, Doug didn't get a chance to play, but amateur versus semi-professional, it was very fun to see them razzing each other. But it's all come down to now, Steve wants to come play with you guys. And I have that video where I visited you guys and you were playing and you were singing Mother by Pink Floyd, way out of tune. We'll give you a second chance at that. So start.
Actually, Roger Waters was out of tune.
Okay, there you go.
That's what we realized.
You fixed it for him.
That's right. We just corrected the glitch.
Artistic license.
Yeah. So,
We
so,
did
so
it
on
on
a
tape.
Tuesday night in New Orleans, you can hear how it was meant to be. Yeah, okay. All right. So we'll have that in the future. Yeah. Anything else you guys wanted? Ryan, you have anything else to share? Anybody else?
There's something I wanted to say. I just give a big thumbs up to 3MA Audio. You know, for all of you who've never had the chance to stop by, you know, it's not that it's the biggest store. It's not that they have the best showrooms and they do have very fine equipment, but for me, it's the people. I mean, you got the owner, Johnny, and you got Lewis, you got Carl, you got some just really, I mean, the finest of the fine people there. And as soon as you walk in that door, you're treated like family. And that is just so, it's rare, it's special. And like, I haven't bought anything from them, you know, and they still treat me like family. I'm sitting good where I am right now. And I feel guilty that I enjoy his parties, I enjoy his hospitality, and yet I haven't, you know, done anything there, but it doesn't matter. It's the way they treat people, and anybody has a chance to do it, just go there.
Yeah.
You know, I have to say that Jason was telling me about 3M, it has been for some time, really kind of did my heart good to hear that's, you know, that have that resource, that they're there. And to me, it's like reminiscent of the old days of the way dealerships used to be. So nice to hear.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few good dealers out there, but unfortunately it's few and far between nowadays. And in most cases, I've heard of nothing but complaints of various dealers. So seeing somebody do it the opposite way, and you know, in a lower stress environment, more of a country club. I'm over there it's almost like a
I was
club for audiophiles.
I was very impressed by their bar.
Yes, the bar is very good.
That bar will get you in trouble.
Exactly. And their gun collection was Doug was Tony Montana from Scarface, and
oh, that's right.
Their gun collection suited him well in that one picture I did with the.
He was trying to give me a AR-15 to go walk around downtown with my costume.
Oh, great! Good idea.
Don't know about that. It is Texas, but I was like, I don't know about
that. Yeah. I had a fake gun, and they even came up to me and I had to check that. So
I was surprised to see that. In fact, I was thinking, man, you're kind of taking some chances with that.
Well, just to have a party like we had with all that expensive gear, I can tell you that 90% of most dealers are too stuffy and too risk averse to even, you know, have that option for either theft or damage and whatnot. And so it's something that, we've kind of worked together on the last couple of years, putting a different type of spin on an audio show where you got the inside, a lot of demos from industry professionals like Nordos and all that. But then you can go outside and just have fun and show that this is not a hobby just for fuddy-duddy old people like Dave.
like all of us. Yeah.
When you finally edit all this together, you should put in that picture of Johnny and his family as they were dressed up that night.
Yeah,
that was a great photo.
They look great.
Oh yeah, Did you put it in the WhatsApp group? Maybe
it should be. It is. I think I upload. If not, I can get it to you. But I think it should be on there.
You remember I was in that squid bodysuit. I had no camera. I had no place to put a camera, so my video is relying on you.
You had no place to put anything.
Exactly. So, it was a great time. Good seeing you guys again, and great catching up with you, Steve, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks.
Heather. Yeah, great having all you guys. It's about right at an hour, so I'm gonna get y'all back.
The dog's letting you know.
Yeah, you hear him in the background? Yeah. It's time to cut it.
So special effects.
Good seeing everybody.
So again, thanks again, guys.
Well, pleasure to see and hear and talk with you all.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks. Thanks very much.